Good evening. Welcome to the special budget council meeting of the municipality of North Perth on November 29th. Please note that our meeting is being streamed live on the municipality's YouTube channel, and our office is open to the public to attend council meetings. This video will also be archived on the YouTube site for viewing in the future. I would ask those in chambers who are able to please stand for the playing of O Canada. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous people of Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. I would like to begin tonight by acknowledging that Councillor Blazek is unable to attend. She did let me know that she had regrets this evening. Next, moving to disclosure of pecuniary interest, council will know that you can disclose now or at any time throughout the meeting. So I will ask if anyone has a disclosure of pecuniary interest at this time. Okay, seeing none. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting if there are no amendments. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Richardson. That is carried. Thank you. All right. Looking at our consent agenda, we have one item on our consent agenda, and that's the North Perth budget meeting minutes from our November 15th meeting. If there's no discussion on those, I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Mayor Kasenberg, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. That is carried. Thank you. All right, moving to item 4. Item 4.1, we have a presentation this evening from Hempson Consulting, and that is on the Northeast Master Plan development charges.
Marabella, associate partner at Hempson. So today's discussion is going to be on a couple mandates. One, we're going to do a bit of a kind of a DC 101, go through some of the legislative changes that have occurred over the last couple years, which are going to certainly impact. That's certainly going to impact the study, and then we'll get into the Northeast Master Plan DC draft calculated rates and kind of next steps associated with that. So just as an overview, as I mentioned, we'll talk more on the DC study, and we'll have the calculation of the rates and our draft results, and we'll get into some of the next steps associated with it. So just for some who may or may not know what are development charge and what are we talking about today, There are charges imposed on development to fund growth-related capital costs, which effectively pays for new infrastructure and facilities to maintain your service level. The idea behind development charges is that growth pays for growth. There's a very specific rules around how we can use it and the type of infrastructure and the services to which DCs can fund, which is why a comprehensive background study has to be done in order to facilitate the municipality to continue to levy these types of fees. So when we think about the Development Charge Act and some of the requirements around it, your DCs are currently imposed by Bylaw 78/2019. The maximum life of that bylaw is 5 years, which means that your bylaw will expire on September 1st of 2024. Your bylaw includes the municipal-wide charges as well as the area-specific components, including the NEMP area charge. As part of this study, and what we're going to be doing is effectively um, breaking out that bylaw, advancing the NEMP area rates earlier because of the development that's occurring, and then continuing along with the municipal-wide background study to have that bylaw passed in time for the expiry of September of next year. Prior to a municipality undertaking or passing a DC bylaw, you have to undertake to do two real things. You have to, one, you have to undertake a background study. The second thing is you have to hold a statutory public meeting. Any appeals are adjudicated to the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal. So when we think about DCs in terms of a municipality's kind of toolbox here of how you fund municipal infrastructure, development charges kind of fall in the realm of kind of what we call the growth funding tools with DCs, community benefit charges, and your parkland dedication fees. This is really about funding growth-related capital infrastructure. Some of those names there you might not be familiar with, particularly the community benefit charges. It's a little bit of a newer tool that came out through the provisions of the Planning Act to replace the density bonusing. It's only allowed to be levied on higher density type development, so not entirely applicable here in the municipality of North Perth. Certainly, amongst a lot of the GTA communities have leveraged that fee to fund capital infrastructure associated with higher density developments. The second component is direct developer contributions. In addition to the DCs themselves, developers are required to in place infrastructure that's directly attributable or associated to their development. So internal water mains, sewer mains, local roads, those would all form of what would be part of their subdivision agreement in which the developer would be responsible for funding, which would be in addition to what we would capture in our development charge background study for recovery. And then the third component being your property taxes and your utility rates, the most kind of common share and the biggest share of revenue for the municipality. That, in addition to funding all the other costs of operating and everything, you would be using those to fund your statutory and non-statutory reductions on development charges. And in particular, once the asset is acquired through DCs, it now becomes the responsibility of the municipality to maintain it over the long term, and that's where your property tax and utility rates would come in to fund the second round replacement of that infrastructure. So when we think about some of the services, and really there's kind of looks at what's municipal wide versus area specific, and it might be a little hard to read on that slide, but generally speaking, the municipal wide services along the left, we have things such as library, your parks and recreation, childcare, public works, roads and related. Those charges are going to be applied municipal wide, regardless of which service area that development will take place. They're going to get the same development charge per unit or per square meter where applicable. Then we have area-specific charges where there's water, wastewater, and stormwater. The charges are levied relative to the service area to which that infrastructure is benefiting. So it's done in a little bit of a different approach, and that's pretty consistent with what we see in other municipalities. Usually your linear infrastructure, your hard services, where appropriate, can be levied on an area-specific component. There are other services available under the Development Charge Act, which didn't have an applicability in the last DC study, but we will obviously review them again if needed. The one thing I will note here is you might notice administrative services is crossed out, which means that under your current bylaw, you are recovering for development-related studies and studies associated with growth. Because of the changes to the legislation under Bill 23, studies are no longer eligible on a go-forward basis. So in our next background study or our next bylaw, we can't include studies for recovery. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means from a revenue perspective as a relationship to your charge. So with that kind of segue in, the legislative world that we live in for development charges has changed quite a bit. The More Homes Built Faster Act received royal assent on November 28th of 2022, which effectively changes how our growth-related funding tools are determined and collected, with a particular emphasis on, in your case, on development charges. And there are significant changes that have been introduced as part of that legislation, which provides for a whole slew of new exemptions and discounts, and as well as the way that changes to your way your existing DC bylaw and future DC bylaw will be administered. There were some minor changes to the community benefit charge legislation, which didn't have a great deal of an impact for many municipalities, but any other community that imposed alternative park fund dedication rates also saw significant changes to the way their revenues will be collected. So when we think about some of those policy changes, what does that mean and how does that impact our Perth? So the biggest thing that we need to consider is now the the statutory discounts and exemptions, which are mandatory. The fully calculated rate that we will calculate has to be phased in over a 5-year period. And that means in year one, no matter what rate that we calculate being the full cost to recover the infrastructure that's needed to service development, you can only impose 80% of that rate in year one. And then it would scale up to 85%, 90%, 95, and so on until year 5. You're now fully collecting 100% of the development charge that we calculated 5 years ago. So that means there's inherent revenue loss associated with that, meaning that each year you're imposing a rate that's lower than full cost recovery. That would shift the burden to recovery to other non-DC sources in order to recoup that. That's going to be more prevalent in your starting September 1st when your new bylaw comes into place. There is some implications here when the Northeast Master Plan area, that bylaw would get passed. It would also be subject to that same phase-in schedule, and I'll show that on the coming slide. There is mandatory exemptions for nonprofit housing, affordable and attainable housing. The province is still working through some of the kinks on affordable and attainable. There's some framework around affordable, but nothing is formally passed. And attainable, there's nothing being released into what exactly that means. You have to provide discounts for rental housing. So if someone's building purpose-built rentals, based on the number of bedrooms, they'll get a tiered discount starting as high as 25% of the DC rate for 3 bedrooms or more, and then scaling down to 15% if it's just a 1-bedroom unit. There's changes to the way we would calculate DCs. The service levels are going to change from a 10-year to a 15-year period, which will effectively moderate how we're going to collect development charges and the way we can increase our rates over the longer term. Housing services and studies is no longer eligible. So studies right now represents about 1% of your current development charge rate. That would come out of our next background study from a recovery perspective. And when we talk about housing services, that's housing as a service, so not housing development. So someone still coming in, building a single-family detached dwelling unit would pay a development charge. But housing in terms of providing affordable housing at the municipality level, you can't be collecting for that. And then there's administrative changes in terms of DC freezes. The DC bylaw, particularly important for Perth. Your next one can go out 10 years now. Your current bylaw would expire after 5 years. But some of the changes to that legislation, your next bylaw, you can map it out and have it extend out to 10 years. That might be an option for many municipalities to kind of run your bylaw to 10 years after you pass the new one. But you still have the option to update earlier, which is something you'll have to consider as you go through. Development patterns change, cost changes. There's certainly sometimes an appetite to update earlier. So when we think about our DC study process, we start off with our development forecast. We look at the infrastructure and servicing needs that are required to service development. We have to do a service level calculation to set the cap and the level of what we can use to fund development charges on a go-forward basis. There's a series of legislative reductions that we need to take into consideration for each capital project on a case-by-case basis. So any grants, subsidies, any reserve funds on hand, those all have to be captured in the calculation of our rate. Once we've identified the number of people, houses that are going to be built, and the number of employees and square meters of GFA that are going to be constructed in the municipality, and we have what infrastructure is needed to support that development, we then have a rate that we calculate between your residential and your non-residential sector. Residentially, the charges on a per unit basis. Non-residentially, they're on a per square foot, per square meter basis of gross floor area. So just in terms of your current structure, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different service areas within the municipality, and the pie chart kind of just shows the distribution of that rate. Your current rate, as according to your bylaw, for a single and semi-detached dwelling unit, it's about $24,000, and it's differentiated by dwelling unit type. You'll notice that, as you, for apartments, there's a margin less than what you would pay from a single family detached dwelling unit because of the occupancy patterns within them. The NEM charge per single and semi-detached unit is about $6,300, which would be in addition to the rate that's outlined over there, and that's your current rate. We'll get into what the calculated rate is for the Northeast Master Plan area. That's on the residential. On the non-residential side, per square foot or per square meter. In this case, we're showing it at a per square foot basis and gross floor area. You'll notice that the categories of service, the last bylaw provided some exemptions, or we discounted effectively all of the non-hard services, so only water, wastewater, and storm levied at non-residential rate. That's a policy directive that occurred last time. We'll have to look if that's something you want to do this time around again. But generally speaking, with the amount of discounts and exemptions provided through Bill 23 now, we may want to consider going more full cost recovery on a lot of the rates that we're seeing. So that's a bit of a background on the legislation, your current structure, and the bill. When we look at the Northeast Master Plan area in particular, the forecast that we have is primarily based on some of the communications through the engineering firms, in which we're looking at a kind of effectively a 10-year planning period for that this area would get constructed. There's about 435 households with about 350 employees, so that translates into a population of about almost 1,200 people and about 21,000 square meters of gross floor area. Um, we've assumed that there's going to be a fairly rapid uptake in that development, with much of the growth occurring in kind of the first 5-year period, and kind of tapering off over the latter end of the planning period. But all of it would be absorbed from a cash flow and from a calculation perspective in a 10-year planning window. So we have our growth forecast, and what are the capital costs associated with this work. So you'll see the far column is your services. So we have stormwater, sewer, and water. All three of those components amounting to about 14.6 million. And what you see is I added in two additional line items for what we call the Moore subdivision, as well as some other additional road costs, which you'll see that it's not necessarily being filtered into the development charge calculation. The Moore subdivision, a lot of those costs are going to be funded directly from the sale of land, and some of the other road costs are going to be considered through the municipal YBC and also just through your general tax levy as a portion of from the recovery of that. The total project cost, both those components combined, is about 27.9 million. So I'll just kind of take you through the columns. The next column is your grants and subsidies, or other contributions, about 10.35 million. Most of which is the Moore subdivision, in which those costs are growth related, but they're going to be recouped through a different mechanism through the sale of land. And then the 845,000 is going to be shifted to the municipal wide as a benefiting party, and that'll be recovered through that TC study in the next couple of months. The benefit to existing share relates to the share of costs which are considered not to be development charge eligible, so that will have to be funded through other sources, primarily for the 3.9 million. That's going to relate to your capital connection charges for your bylaw that was recently passed. We'll recover those charges from existing properties. And then the other road cost is going to relate to the share of the cost that we do the tax levy for your road programs. There are some monies in reserve funds from the TCs which we'll use, and all the remaining share, that's 10.6 million. That's going to be TC recoverable in period, and that's the amount that we're going to be recovering or calculating to recover from development charges from those 350 employees, as well as the the new households that we have in that forecast. So what does that mean from a calculation perspective? The fully calculated rate for a single and semi-detached dwelling unit is close to $25,000 for a single and semi-detached dwelling unit, and then differentiated by type goes at about 16,600, and your apartments between almost 10,000 and 14,200 for a two-bedroom unit. On the non-residential side, it's about $136 per square meter. And what we have there, those are the fully calculated rates. And you see, I've structured in the mandatory phase-in as a requirement in Bill 23. So assuming the fully calculated rates are adopted, the municipality will only be able to enforce from the first year 80% of that rate. So looking just at the single and semi-detached dwelling unit line as an example, it'd be about $19,900. And then it would scale up with time to $24,900 at the 5-year period in which you'll be collecting at the fully recoverable rate. So, generally speaking, the revenue loss or the phase-in would result in some revenue losses associated with that. We just structured it in there. They're pretty high-level estimates. The timing is obviously not concrete, and the timing of development would be subject to change, and obviously identify the revenues here. But given that, and with those phases, it's about $300,000 in 2024, 235,000 in 2025, kind of in year stages, and then 161,000, 82,000, and by 2028, you're at the full rate. That's the revenue loss, particularly just from the phase-in. If there was any developments associated within that housing forecast that would relate to nonprofit housing, purpose-built rentals, or anything that would meet the criteria of affordable or attainable when that definition comes online, they would be in addition to the phase-in loss that we're seeing. So it's kind of just a bit of a compounding effect to it. But that is kind of a baseline of what you could see from a revenue loss, which would have to be absorbed from other non-DC sources. So you may ask yourself, what does that mean relative to the rates that we currently have? They're certainly going up quite substantially from the rate that's currently enforced. It's about $6,300 at the current single detached dwelling unit rate. We've calculated closer to $25,000, which is almost 300% increase, or $18,000 on that charge, and a similar kind of scalable increase on the non-residential side of about $108 per square meter. The capital costs have changed pretty substantially from the very high level estimates that we had 5 years ago, which is really the kind of the direct input and result of why we're seeing the scalable increase that we're seeing here on the rates just to recover those infrastructure charges. So just to kind of put the timelines into context here, there's a recognition from staff about wanting to advance this Northeast Master Plan area ahead of schedule from the municipal-wide bylaw. So what that means is we're obviously wanting to come to you first, kind of show the study process and what those results, these draft results, are looking like. We're anticipated to go ahead and prepare a background study, release it publicly for consultation with the hopes of having something passed in the spring, March, or April, with the full DC background study being released a few months later than that, kind of in June, so your rates will be passed for August and September of 2024 on the municipal-wide side, and the municipal-wide bylaw would now kind of extract the NEP area from that, because that would be advanced as a standalone bylaw starting in March or April of 2024. So that's my presentation. It's a little longer than I anticipated, but hopefully provide some information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Talk about the phase-in.
Mhm.
So year 5, we can charge 100%.
Correct.
Year 6 to 10, we can also stay at 100%.
That's correct, yeah.
Unless we want to renew it early. So if year 6 we decide things have changed, we want to redo it, then we would start back at 80% again, wouldn't we?
Through the chair, that's correct. So the moment you pass a new bylaw, you would then be re-subject to the phase-in. So what we've been communicating to municipalities is that when you're looking at updating your bylaw, and if it is early, you kind of have to do a bit of a maybe a sensitivity test early to make sure that the lack of a better word, the juice is worth the squeeze, and which you're experiencing cost increases that has to be greater than what the phase-in loss would be.
Like what we are now
Exactly.
in the Northeast.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mayor Kasenberg.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand something. Second last slide where you show current versus draft calculated charges. This pertains to the NEMP additional component, right?
Correct.
So you're showing a draft charge that's calculated here at this point, and I know it's still early in the game, of 24,905. That would be added to the 23,455 that we charge routinely, or whatever its replacement value is when we get there. And so we're talking about development charges that are running pretty darn close, if I'm doing the math, to $50,000 in this community. That seems very significant.
Through the chair, that's a correct interpretation. This would be the rate that would be in addition to the municipal-wide rate that would get charged.
Indeed.
But obviously, only the select benefiting parties of this infrastructure would be paying that, not everybody throughout the municipality.
If I could, just one supplemental question. I will move to a different topic, though. With regards to affordable housing and the exemptions, can you talk just a little bit more about what we do know at this point versus what we don't know?
I do know that they are exploring different ways of implementing that affordable housing definition. And I'm trying to be careful because we've had to sign some non-disclosure agreements with the province on what because we're in the middle of consultations with them. But they're looking at different ways of doing that. And I mean, there's a proposal that's out there, but I'm assuming we will see something more formalized in the next coming months. But it's toned down from what's been released publicly. But I think the initial conversations or thought was that all development would be considered or classified as affordable, and that's not the case.
But the word exemption does have a specific meaning, which, at least in my mind, it is like those units, those houses, that form will not potentially see any DCs.
That's right. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Chair Anstett, and thanks, Andrew, for your presentation. At the very beginning of your presentation, the Development Charges Act, which was first started in 1989, was the premise is that growth pays for growth. Clearly, based on your presentations here, is that with the changes that the province has imposed through Bill 23, which Association of Municipalities of Ontario have expressed considerable concern about, and the province came back to say that municipalities will be made whole for any reductions. So when we look at slide 18, for example, or page 18, I think is it your slide 18 as well?
That wouldn't be my slide.
You're 14, our page agenda 18, but so it says any MP losses from the phase-in. Your information or discussions with the province and knowing nothing like other than what we have been, all municipalities have been told, is that we will be made whole. So do you take from that information that in fact municipality of North Perth can expect to see annual contributions from the province to make up for this based on what their letter has said to municipalities saying that we'll be made whole?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question. We've gotten that question a lot over the last year and a half, because there was the statement about being made whole. We do know that the province is undertaking the audits or the DC audits for some select communities. 5 communities, and obviously centered in the GTA. We are hoping that once the audit is complete, they will release about how they may plan to make municipalities whole. I think that audit process will determine if municipalities have funds on hand to offset some of these losses or not. So there hopefully will be some conclusions drawn from that audit process. We haven't seen those results just yet.
Further, thank you very much. And I don't want to beat a a dead horse here, but I mean, like the phase-in is only one of the parts where the province has chosen to, frankly, listen to the development community as opposed to the municipalities in terms of studies which are open, public, transparent, public input, good consulting firms and engineering and so on put forward to put all these information into the public view. Is that these are true costs that municipalities need to collect to help growth pay for growth.
Right.
So it's a frustration that we have, and of course, I mean, here we are as budget committee, and the reality is, as you said earlier, is that from other sources, the municipalities' other sources, well, truly, we have one main source, and that's all of our taxpayers. So truly, we're going away from growth paying for growth, and we're getting back into the issue is that the whole of the tax base is going to help offset the reductions in growth-related capital costs that we're not able to collect because we've had one arm tied behind our back for that phase-in period, as well as, for example, administration costs being left off the table. So my understanding through you, Chair Anstead, is AMO is continuing to have discussions with the province on this very important issue for all municipalities, and knowing full well that we have to move forward with this project, and it's a good thing we are because it is going to take time. So I'll get off my soapbox here for a little bit. I wish you all the best in terms of dealing with this. But as Mayor Todd pointed out, if the number comes across in the Northeast plan area in particular, we're going to have some people that are just not happy about what that number is. I don't think anyone around the council was particularly happy with those numbers, but frankly, the numbers are the numbers in terms of here's what it costs for that. I mean, it's a huge project that's going on up there. And in order to have development up at our north end, we had to do significant work. So, I mean, that's the reality of growth having to pay for growth. But we're still only going to be getting that reduced amount over that 5-year period. And it's going to be doubled by the fact that it's the NEMP reduction as well as the DC reduction that we've got that's going to exacerbate it. So it's a double whammy for us as a municipality and our taxpayers because that's the reality. Is that true? I mean, in terms of
No. Through the chair, and it is a bit of a frustrating part to the bill where I think it's the intention of the bill is to build more homes, and I think there's also a bit of a disconnect in my view that we are taking away the tool for municipalities to place the infrastructure that's necessary to let the developments proceed to build the homes that's absolutely necessary, right? And so putting them and taking a step back and making municipalities rethink about going forward with certain projects and allowing critical pieces of infrastructure to allow development to proceed is where I see the problem, right? And particularly around water and wastewater infrastructure, you just can't build without that infrastructure. You can't build new homes. So taking away the recovery mechanism for it doesn't seem to be the right line of sight. So I share your same frustrations with that, but that is not my decision, unfortunately.
It's just my comment. I'll just jump in here quickly. I know your last slide is our timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I know that our current development charge bylaw expires on the first of and obviously just the comments from Councillor Rothwell and Johnson just about the timing. I'm just concerned that we don't have answers to a lot of these questions. Are we going to have them in your opinion, are we going to have them in time?
At which questions particularly? Like
well,
the growth
specifically about the growth, that's the biggest piece. How can we pass a new bylaw, in my opinion, if we don't have these answers surrounding growth and the charges that we're going to be expected to?
So there's assumptions around growth that's built into the model. I mean, you don't necessarily need to have everything that's in a perfect world where you'll have all the costs and the growth assumptions tied up to a T. I think we have to have reasonable assumptions, and that's why there is the process to amend bylaws, and you can repass a new bylaw later, recognizing that if information changes, and that's we started out 5 years ago with high level assumptions around what the costs were and the assumptions, and now we're a lot closer to this development, and we've revamped what is here, and that's why we're seeing a lot of the changes in the rates. But at the same time, the sensitivity around advancing it is that we don't want to be caught where the development starts to proceed and then the rates aren't updated, because then further exasperates the problem of not collecting enough to recover the infrastructure needs.
Oh, sorry, Chris, Councillor CO Snell, go ahead.
I think that's a challenge that even staff always face when we do development charges. It's really hard for us to predict the future, and so we try to move say 5 years. The challenge going to be is if it's something that's really feasible and financially feasible to stretch out for 10 years, but we've encouraged to say what's ahead 2 years from now. So we really have to try and do better with the crystal ball. It's a challenge. Considering having been here 13 years last year, and it's likely to be 10 years. Yeah, we're penalized if we open it up sooner.
Thanks, CO Snell. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
So, through Chair Anstett, Andrew, again, just slipping back. So, the community benefits charges that we talked about earlier on the slide deck there, I mean, it was my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, was that when the province came out with the community benefits charge, it was supposed to basically offset some of the original changes to Development Charges Act, that municipalities could help offset those reductions. So is it anticipated that the province is going to come out with additional the rest of the legislation that or is our community benefits charges not in the near future for a community like North Perth? Do we have to be a large urban center with transit ways and that sort of thing to be able to truly implement a community development or benefits charge? Pardon me.
Yep. So through the chair, community benefit charge is a replacement for Section 37 density bonusing. And it can only be levied on units or developments with 5 or more stories and 10 or more units. So there's very strict criteria. So at the time, it can be used interchangeably with DCs, but really only communities that have those types of high density developments are levying that CBC. So you can certainly pass a CBC bylaw but we have to demonstrate the need that there's those types of developments occurring, and then the infrastructure that we have that's supporting that rate is tied to that higher density units.
Just further, if I may, just on that point. So North Perth, we're starting to see some developments of that height. Not all, many, a few, one that we've seen so far. So getting ready, like into the future, I think we have to be prepared. But still, that promise or carrot that has been out there for municipalities like ours, where you're actually, some of the changes where the province came in to say, oh, by the way, we're going to have this. Well, we're not truly there yet to be able to take advantage of that tool. So it's truly out in the future, maybe.
Yeah, and through the chair, I mean, where the CBC was relevant in some of those communities, it didn't come in as a benefit, because removal of Section 37, it probably results in less revenue for some communities than what the CBC would be bringing in, because the CBC is capped by legislation. You can only do it at 4% of the land value, so it's not at you can't charge to everything that's needed as a result of high density development either.
Yep, go ahead.
Frankly, I don't think anyone would like a tool in their toolbox which is already hamstrung.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, exactly. Someone like yourself it would be something new, but I mean, you really have to weigh the benefits of implementing that charge, going through the admin side without having enough development to support that revenue side.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, thanks, Andrew, very much for your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Council, moving to agenda item number 5, we have the approval of additional 2023 project funding sources. And you'll note in our package that there is a few to go through here. So CO Snell is going to speak to these, I believe. Go ahead.
So we have three projects in the 2023 budget, or the weren't budgeted for in the 2023 budget. Council is very familiar with two of the projects. One was the anticipated purchase of 104 Wallace. That certainly came up through the year without our prior knowledge. We did the budget. Number three is the Mainland Valley Conservation Authority flood identification mapping. I frankly just forgot to put that in my budget, so that's why it's on the list, but certainly council was aware of it. And the third one was the replacement of the HP color printer system, which does our large mapping system. So again, it was a maintenance and costing. It was costing us more to fix the old one, and I tried to remember how old the old one was, and I asked Lyndon as the department that uses the most, and he said it was here before he was. So it's the best information I have tonight, but certainly can answer any questions council may have.
Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Just a question about the plotter. The large format plotter. Hasn't been looked at instead of actually incurring a capital expenditure for a pay-per-use program, because in where I currently work, we have the identical machine and we're in a pay-per-use program, whereas all maintenance, all machine upgrades, or any redundancies that they would get fixed by the company, obviously warranty comply, you have to call the service tech in to do that. They supply all the paper, all of the ink, all of the print heads if necessary, and it's a pay-per-use monthly, and you run a report every month and you get charged accordingly for that. We actually found it economical for our printing purposes for what we were doing, that it was economical to do that, and it always keeps you current that you don't get a big capital hit. These printers can range from, they last a long time. It's not like a home printer. Large format printers are built a little differently. That's why they're 20 grand.
Yeah, and they do last a number of
They
years.
last a long time. Like this one, we've had this one for quite a number of years, and it's still a current model. And for a piece of electronic equipment, that's pretty good for several years. It's just something that I wasn't sure if that had been looked at, because I do know some of the other equipment that we have possibly is on a lease base. Paper use is a little bit different.
I'm sure we would have looked at that, but I can go back and look at it. This is certainly something we can look at for next time for sure.
Like next time, not this time, or
because it's been purchased already in 2023.
okay.
Okay. Is there any other question? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Coach.
Just to add, we did look at leasing and we did look at a rental arrangement. This was the most cost effective because of what you said. They're robust machines that last for a long time. The rental rates would have exceeded the outright purchase. So we discussed it actually at length and went with this option earlier this year because it was failing, but also because it was the most cost-effective method of purchasing a new unit. It's well used. Just to let you know, we did review it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this time on any of these project additions? Councillor Rothwell, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair Anstett. Thanks, Chris, for the report. The question I have is the flood hazard identification mapping program. So is this an update from the last mapping program that was done by MVCA about 8 years ago or something, 10 years ago?
So this is the project that came to council. We applied for the money from the federal government to pay for half of it, and our contribution was this 87.5. It is updating the mapping. So the list one mapping, I understand, was done, I was going to say, I thought it was more like 15 years ago from what Maitland Valley staff told me. And plus we're also expanding the mapping to the north because it's never been done outside the former Listowel ward boundary. And just with growth, we're going to probably see some further north of that. And plus we're doing all the way down through Alma right through to Henford, which has never been done.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, seeing none, I have a motion here that I'll read so that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the proposed funding sources for additional capital projects. The project additions are: number one, an HP Design Jet T2600 36-inch color printer at a cost of $19,325.25. Our cost to be funded from roads reserves. Number 2, purchase of 104 Wallace Avenue for $950,000 to be funded by administration reserves. And number 3, consulting from Maitland Valley Conservation Authority for flood hazard identification and mapping program for $87,500 to be funded from the emergency reserve fund. Can I have a mover for that? Vice Chair Nordum, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to our next item. It's reports, our report section. And we have 2 reports. Our 6.1 is our operating budget. That's the flip book. So we'll start with that. Yeah, it's up on the screen if council isn't able to get it. Okay, so I think this is an opportunity, council, for anybody to ask any questions about any things that they had further, looking for further clarification on or further points. Obviously, this was previously presented to council in our previous budget meetings, but this is another opportunity for council to provide comments or ask questions of department heads regarding their operating budget. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Just a question. The school bus stop arm cameras, are we going to consider that as a possibility under item 6.3, or are we considering that a operating budget?
So that was going to be, sorry, go ahead. 6.2, yeah, so that would be a capital.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if there are no other comments or questions about the operating budget for 6.1, I think we can move into 6.2, which is the capital budget, ebook. And I know one of the comments that was, questions that was asked was about the school bus stop arm cameras, and I know we did have a discussion previously about that, and I know Councillor Rothwell had some information that he wanted to share with council. Okay, so just looking for some direction for from council, and maybe Councillor Rothwell, if you wanted to provide that information at this time, and then council can have a discussion on that.
Thanks very much, Chair Ansett and council and staff. I did have conversation further with John Chapman from Newry Coach Lines, and he confirmed that $3,300 is the amount which he's quoting for school bus stop arm camera per bus, and he is suggesting a total of 10 buses, and his hope is that 5 of those would be from Newry Coach Lines, as well as 5 from Elliott Coach school bus line as well, operating within North Perth, especially on our busy roads such as Perth Line 86 and Road 164, Highway 23. Those routes in particular, where they have sort of the most volume of traffic. And in those discussions with John Chapman, who made the presentation with his son Ryan, just prior to the November 15th meeting, I did have discussion with him over these last couple weeks. But a number which I was put forward for council's consideration for inclusion in the budget would be somewhere in the order of $6,600, and my rationale for that would be 2 school bus stop arm cameras or at least the value of that could be put towards the pilot project. And that's my rationale, was coming up with that number. Certainly open for discussion with council, but I think given our discussion as council about the importance of this matter and seeing how we've had significant delegation from school bus operators with firsthand knowledge of the issues and challenges, as well as the fact that our resolution that has gone across the province and has sparked more dialogue about this, including the Remember Adam campaign. I think it's important for North Perth to realize that the province of Ontario has not come to the table as yet to realize the importance of these pilot projects moving forward to become rolled out across the province. So frankly, if this council is willing, I think we can show the province of Ontario that this is an important matter, that we're willing to put our taxpayers' money forward to ensure safety and enforcement of rules, which are provincial regulations and rules regarding the importance of stopping for school buses. So my suggestion for consideration for council, and we'll make a motion at an appropriate time, would be $6,600 added to the budget to offset the cost for the pilot project.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Paul. Go ahead, Councillor Andreessen.
Through you, Chair Anstett, I'm a bit confused because that would only cover 2 buses, correct? And I thought that the request coming from the bus operators was much more substantial than that, unless, is there funding coming from other sources, or?
Go ahead,
You
Councillor
can
Rothwell.
explain that, thanks.
Through you, Chair Anstett, thanks for the question. I think my understanding from Mr. Chapman is that the school bus operators are prepared to underwrite the costs for the pilot project themselves. They certainly appreciate whatever assistance can be given. The number was not suggested that I've put forward. If this council wants to have more than that, just know that the total for 10 buses, based on my math, is $33,000. So it's a lot of money. And frankly, when we look at the work that our staff and council's considered, or budget committee has considered to this point, I just came up with a number which is a measured amount. If this council wants to underrate the full cost, I'm sure Nuri Coach Lines and Elliott buses will be quite happy to hear that. Frankly, I would too, but it's a matter that I just thought sort of at least a helping hand towards that was my intent in terms of the number. But again, if this council wants to underrate that more than that or the full cost, that's council's prerogative.
Thanks very much for that explanation, Councillor Rothwell, and I'll just weigh in quickly. So we did have some discussions, Vice Chair Nordum and I, along with Treasurer Romani and Deputy Treasurer Belfour, just regarding the amount, and this information this evening is helpful. And obviously, this is a very important issue, and thanks again, Councillor Rothwell, for bringing this to the forefront, not just locally, but I think across Ontario and many other municipalities in the province. In terms of the amount, again, that's very great news that the school bus operators are willing to take on a significant amount of this. That's how we had left it at our last meeting with the Finance Committee, was that we were looking for Council's direction on to where we would go with that. So again, I'm leaving it up to Council at this point as to where our direction would be. Go ahead, Mayor Kiesenberg.
Thanks, Chair Anstett. When I think about this, a pilot, if, let's just say, under the scenario that we are considering, the school bus companies decide they don't want to make that investment, and so we're on the hook for 2 cameras, and that's not much of a pilot, to be honest, right? It's not going to get us too far. So I would suggest as an alternative that we go 50-50 with the operators and suggest that we'll buy 5 cameras if they'll buy 5 cameras, so that we have a legitimate 10 camera lineup here and 10 buses that can participate in this pilot. That way we're sure that we get the kind of results that are reasonable and to scale.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor Kasenberg. That's good, good feedback for sure. Is there any other members of council that had any comments on this? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Anstead. And I tend to agree with the mayor on this one. Not that I always agree with the mayor, but tonight I do. I think it's a fair offer for us, and it goes back to something I think you say a fair bit. We got to put some skin in the game, with affordable housing and with a whole bunch of things. And once again, with this one, we can keep sending out letters to every municipality, but once again, let's put some skin in the game. Let's get some results, and when the province sees it in X amount of months or whatever, that we're getting results, then we can say, okay, we were a leader in this, and let's get it across the province and let's save kids. That's really what it's about for me. So I would echo the mayor. Let's go 50-50 with Mary Coach and Elliott Bus Lines.
Well, thanks, Councillor Johnson. Any other comments, or go ahead, Councillor Duncan.
Just a question. I kind of agree with the 50-50. Is that 50-50 to a certain dollar level? Are we going to put a cap on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Quick math again is 16,500 in terms of the information again that was publicly made available by John Chapman from Mary Coach was $3,300 per bus for the camera. That was the amount that was given. So again, this is different than the report from Annette Diamond from the county, which talked about the whole administrative monetary penalty system, which had a whole host of other important matters, which get you way beyond school bus stop arm cameras. It was the administration staff required for that, as well as license fees per license that was pulled and so on. It's a huge number, and that gets you speeding tickets and all kinds of things. If that's not our issue, then 16,500 would get you half of what the total, based on the information John Chapman gave us. So if I can give that information, again, that was verified as late as 4:30 today, or 5 o'clock today, pardon me, was $3,300 per bus, and if we're in for half of the total of 10, that's 16,500, and we'll let taxes and everything else. But I mean, if this for the budget committee's consideration, so it's 16,500 for half, based on the information John Chapman provided.
No, thanks, Councillor Rothwell. And I'm certainly in agreement with the mayor. I think that this speaks volumes, not only locally but provincially as well. And like Councillor Johnson said about getting some skin in the game and being a leader, I think is something that we really want to be known for in this field. So I guess I'd just be looking for some direction from council if this is the will of council. Go ahead, Mayor Kasenberg.
Yeah, I'll put a motion on the floor then to the effect that we add to our capital estimates a project amount of $16,500, which represents 50% of the anticipated costs of purchasing 10 stop arm cameras by our two identified school bus lines. Poor Clerk Jameson is typing furiously.
So seconded by Councillor Rothwell, I'm assuming, or okay. So when we have that motion, we can see it up on the screen, and council can vote. And Mayor Kasenberg's recording a manual vote in favor, and that's carried. Thanks very much, council. Go. Oh, sorry, CEO Snell.
Thank you, Council. But just clearly from an administrative standpoint, the school bus operators are still going to take the lead. We're really just going to be funding this project. And so we would give either Alliance and or Newry half of that, or if, or whatever fraction they agree on how the buses will be implemented. But that'll be our contribution. They'll work out all the details with the school board and the OPP.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Chair Anstett. What great action this budget committee has just made. When you work at something as hard as this council has, it's important to realize the importance of that matter for our community. And I think with the committee's permission, Chair Anstett and I can have further conversation with our Roma
Representative
from Senator Wellington. He has raised this issue at the Roma board table, and I think it's important with this resolution being passed that will show that North Perth is going to be a partner in this to the extent that we are, and hopefully we'll certainly inform MPP Ray as well to show, and frankly, we can do a resolution later to the whole province to realize that this matter, we're going to follow the lead of Sudbury and bring this matter hopefully in a wave that will go across the province to ensure student safety. So I am very grateful for this committee. I thank the Mayor and Councillor Johnson for their encouragement to think bolder than I was prepared to do, and I think that speaks volumes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Rothwell. On behalf of myself and the rest of the council, thanks very much for your lead on this very important initiative. Okay, moving on to item number 7, our operating capital budget updates. So you'll see in your package, Council, there's a spreadsheet with these items listed. And we're going to be having a few of these that will be covered, discussed, I should say. I know that Mr. Couch is going to be talking about one. Did you want to do that now, Lyndon?
I'm going to have to look at the screen. Just this is a bit of a different format than what I'm familiar with. Can I speak specifically on any one item, or should I just go through the listing?
So I was just going to go off of the ones from our package here, the ones that need the additional approval. So the one was for the road widening of Highway 23. That's the first one that I was hoping you could speak to.
Yep, very good. I think it's on page, you've got the page in front of you. Thank you, Clerk Sarah. This project is looking for connecting link funding. It's the widening of a portion of the roadway of Highway 23, basically in front of the malls. We're adding additional curb line, a center turning lane, as well as a sidewalk on the mall side. So these approvals are all related to a funding application that went out last week to the Ministry of Transportation. That funding application requests a resolution from Council on the project. I did supply the resolution from last year, which was the engineering services for this project. So there was a commitment last year. It would be good to augment that with a pre-budget approval of this project this year, which represents $850,000 of a $1.74 million project. And that is the overall road upgrades that we're talking about. We'll get up to and around $900,000 of funding from the MTO if we have an application that is approved and accepted. And again, just looking for that resolution to endorse the project now, that it can augment our funding approval and probably be sent off as early as tomorrow.
Okay, are there any, thanks very much, Mr. Coach. Are there any questions for Lyndon at this point on that project? Okay, and then going back to the other screen, Clerk. No, sorry, the other one with yeah, that one. Are there any other items on here that anybody has any questions regarding Any questions or comments for Mr. Couch while he's here? Any projects that relate to him? Go ahead, Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you, Chair Anstett. Just back to the previous one that we were just talking about. So we've put in a funding application. So our budget's based on the hope that we actually get that funding. Is that correct? And what I want to be positive here.
Yes.
Just in case we don't get it. Budget-wise, what are we doing? Like, we'll have to do a budget amendment then to make up for the amount. Is that correct? Or how are we going to deal with that?
Yeah, the recommendation is that contingent on the funding, we would move ahead with the project, which costs $850,000. If the funding isn't received, I would come back to council and a budget amended would be requested at that time.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Rothwell. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Are there any other questions on any of the other capital projects or from this chart that's on the screen, the spreadsheet? Okay, seeing none. Thanks very much, Mr. Couch.
Thanks.
Okay, so if there's no other comments or questions on item number 7, we'll move to item number 8, which is our tax rate impact. And this was obviously circulated to council before the meeting in our agenda package as well. So we'll go through this here. I do have a few comments, and I do apologize. My voice is starting to wear on me here, so I do apologize in advance. Okay. All right, so looking at this slide, I'll just go through a few comments like I mentioned here. So first off, just with the budget process, just a few thank yous. Thanks to the Finance Department, Deputy Treasurer Balfour and our new Treasurer Romani. Thanks for your help and guidance during this budget process. Vice Chair Nordum, thanks again for your insight and dedication. It's been very helpful. Also, thanks to Council. At the beginning of this budget process, I did challenge each of you that there was no such thing as a bad idea, and that encouraged you to think outside of the box when we were discussing our ideas. So you will note in the spreadsheet here our proposed tax levy. You'll see the increase for 2024, and it's broken down for single family, farm assessment, industrial assessment, and commercial assessment. So I feel that this is a reasonable number based on our current climate here in North Perth. I would like to point out that this budget does include key investments in many areas which are crucial that will ensure North Perth meets its current and future needs. For example, just a few highlights: some key investments in equipment will allow staff to do their jobs more effectively. Obviously tonight, school bus stop arm cameras will ensure that those who are committing acts of dangerous driving around school buses can be held accountable. Also investments in recreation, ensuring that we're in a position to provide top-notch recreation opportunities for our residents, both young and old. Also highlighted in this budget as well, that we do have some funds included for reserves. You'll note that this was a key objective that I had mentioned in our budget visiting session. Ensuring that these funds are set aside, I think, is not only a good budget practice, but also allows us to have these funds use these funds as needed in the future. At this point, though, I would be open to council if they have any other comments or questions about our where we're at this point. So go ahead, Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Anstett. I just want to thank you and Vice Chair Nordum for all your efforts to prepare this budget. I know there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, and you've done a great job in a short period of time, so it's very much appreciated. I do have a question, though. Given that we just had some conversations about, making some changes and adding some items in, does that affect the tax levy that we see it on the screen at the moment?
Well, thanks very much, Chair Andreessen. So go ahead, sorry, Deputy Treasurer Belfour or Treasurer Romani, you want to comment on that?
Through your clearance, are you speaking to the adjustments made tonight with respect to the school cameras, or the net adjustments that we've had on the levy? So the budget package that was presented tonight for both the capital and the operating, the impacts you see on the screen take everything into account. So effectively, yes, this is as it is. Yeah.
Sorry, so it does take into account the changes that we just talked about, like the additional cameras and that kind of thing?
Yeah, the additional cameras will come from our infrastructure reserves or one of our reserve funds, so there's no impact on the operating budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Treasurer Romani. Any other questions or comments at this point? Oh, Vice Chair Nordum, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Anstead. So right now our property bills are being assessed off the 2016 impact. Do we have an idea of when it will be updated? Whether this, I know it's a can of worms, but whether it will be this one or the next one?
Go ahead, Treasurer Romani.
Through your chair, I said the most recent news from the province is it's postponed once again, particularly for the upcoming assessment year. Hopefully next year we hear some news, but it's been the same sentiment that's been shared with all the municipalities across Ontario with respect to the next assessment update.
Next year's my year, so I might be a little nervous.
I wasn't going to say that, but anyway. Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions at this point? Okay. So seeing none, if it's council's will, I'd like to move forward with our item number 9, our council direction. And we do have a few items here, motions, I would say. And the first one, it's one that we already had Mr. Couch speak to. So we'll pass this, we'll have a vote on this one now if it's council's will. But the Council of Municipality in North Perth grants pre-budget approval for the road widening of Highway 23 in the amount of $850,000 contingent on MTO connecting link funding approval. Looking for a mover, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Johnston. Have that vote, please. That is carried. Thank you. And our next motion, again, if it's council's will, I have a motion here that I'll read into the record. Staff be directed to prepare the 2024 budget information package and present it at the regular council meeting on December 18th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Rothwell, seconded by Vice Chair Nordum. We can have the vote on that. That's carried. Thank you very much, Council. Really appreciate everyone's efforts in this process. It was a very, as everyone knows, a lot of work went into it, and it's great teamwork from everyone involved. Going along with that, being that we have taken this action this evening, we do have another motion that the clerk's prepared for us, and it reads that the December 13th, 2023 budget meeting be cancelled as a result of our work tonight. Can I have a mover for that? Mayor Kasenberg, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Have the vote on that, please. And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll move to our confirmatory bylaw. I'll read that into the record. That bylaw 147/2023, being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, is hereby passed. I'm looking for a mover for that. Vice Chair Nordum, seconded by Councillor Johnston. The vote on that, please. That is carried. Thank you. And if there's no other business this evening for council, I have a motion here to adjourn. The budget meeting adjourns at 8:15 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, December 4th, 2023. Moved by Deputy Mayor Callum, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. That is carried.